So the astrology of the week of 30 May 2022 through 5 June 2022. Cool week of astrology. We get the official end of eclipse season, you might say, with a new moon in Gemini. The moon will get seated by that sun in the sign of Gemini. First syzygy in Gemini since the lunar nodes have moved out of the sign. That's really cool. And then we also get two planets stationing this week. We get Mercury stationing direct in Taurus on Algol. That should be the beginnings of the removal of some blocks. And then we get Saturn stationing retrograde, one of its final retrograde stations in the sign of Aquarius. Actually, its final retrograde station there. And so we're doing a lot to finish this Saturn and Aquarius story, which ends officially in March 2023. So welcome to another week of astrology. S.J. Anderson here. Welcome to my channel. I talk about the astrology of the week every week. And let's just jump right in. This week is three major things. We've got a new moon here in Gemini. This will go down on Monday, 1330 in Central Europe. This is my transit of the week, actually. Out of all the moons, the moment the moon is seated with the sun, I think will bring the best energy this week. The second thing that we're looking at in this video is going to be the station direct of Mercury, which happens on 3 June. What is that? I don't always have the days of the week memorized when I look at these dates, but we can count down together here. 30 is Monday, 31 is Tuesday, 1 is Wednesday, 2 is Thursday. So that will be the Friday direct station of Mercury at 10 a.m. in Central Europe on the button. And that's going to be movement ahead, movement forward, right? The removal of blocks. I think that's Rhetorius the Egyptian who talks about the direct station as being the removal of blocks. We get that this week. And then we get Saturn stationing retrograde in Aquarius the next day. So Saturday the 4th, you'll have Saturn stationing retrograde, 2346, right at the end of the evening here on Saturday in Central Europe. This is an interesting transit. Mundane astrologers, particularly medieval mundane astrologers, were very interested in Saturn stations as timing major turns in world events. Maybe we'll see something like that this week, but we'll break the chart down. And about this moon, the one thing I just want to say about it is it spends, other than this Gemini period early in the week when it is seated by the sun and refreshed for a new lunation, a new lunar month, the moon will be square Mars when it's in Cancer this week, and then it will be opposite Saturn in Leo. And so much of this week is the moon in hard aspect to Mars and Saturn. And that's why I like the Gemini moon as the transit of the week, trying to take advantage of some of the opportunities there. So let's get to this new moon, this first moment, this transit of the week. Not only is it a new moon, it's significant in its own right. I think it's some of the best astrology of the week. As a caveat, I would say, the moment of the seating of the moon is it's about an hour where the moon will be in that degree, is the moment I'm interested in to about 2 hours when the moon will be very close to the sun, in the heart of the sun. This is what I'm interested in enjoying. A lot of the kind of contemporary magicians or contemporary pop astrological magic is very much into the new moon, full moon rituals. And I think this is the week where you might want to do that. Sit with the moon as it's seated over that 2-hour period. Think about this summer. Think about the really cool astrology that this lunation will govern, because this whole lunation period, about 28 days, includes some of the best astrology of 2022. I had a video on that I published recently. It's the June astrology where it gets good. It's this month where I think we should move into our powers maybe more than we've been able to in quite some time. But I think sitting with the new moon as it becomes exact and maybe getting into some of that projection or visioning or thinking about what you want to do in June, maybe some of July, is a useful way to use this energy. The other thing is that Gemini is very important in 2022 because Mars will be retrograde there for 8 months, starting 20 August, ending March 2023. And so this is also a time to sit with the Gemini sector of our charts, ideas, thoughts, thinking, writing, analysis, connectivity of all kinds, curiosity, ideas, detail-orientated approaches, and bring our mentality into focus around some of those themes, because we're going to be with them intensely. Starting maybe now, there's only 1 month with nothing in Gemini. That's some of July after Venus moves into Cancer. That happens, I think, July 19th or something like that, 18th, 19th. And then we'll have only 1 month before Mars enters Gemini, 20 August, where we're Gemini free. And so, but this syzygy, this new moon, is symbolically saying, get fresh and get renewed with Gemini as a sign, as an archetype, and where it's situated in your nativity. The other thing is that this is the first syzygy without the North Node in Gemini, full moon in 2019. That was the last syzygy here. So there is a sense of being done with the fated beginnings and endings, with the eclipsy activation of Gemini. When those nodes leave a sign, it can be settling often, and we can stabilize that sign. And so enjoy that Gemini and Gemini energy and Gemini archetype. Enjoy the sort of settled refreshment of your sign this moment, this syzygy, Monday, 13:30 here in Central Europe this week. The other thing I love about this chart is that Mars is sextile, Saturn is trine. There are no hard aspects with Mars and Saturn or the lunar nodes. So this is a sweet moment of the sun and moon mixing and interfacing without having to deal with some of those harsh energies that were very, very prominent during eclipse season, with both eclipses square Saturn in Aquarius. We're finished with that, and this is why I think symbolically we get a sense of refreshment here. The other thing, or another thing, is that Mercury is direct, effectively stationing direct in this chart. Mercury will be in the degree of its direct station. Some people may be a little bit afraid of this Mercury. I'm going to break it down a lot in this video. You might say this whole week is the story of why Mercury has power now and the beneficial component and turn here of Mercury, even though it's conjunct to fixed star Algol. But that's not to necessarily be terrified of. In fact, Algol can be an energy, if we approach it with reverence and humility, that can be greatly beneficial. Mercury is a morning star. The rebirth of this retrograde is near completion. It's very slow and stopping near this station, which happens later in the week, in that degree of the direct station. Those direct stations are removal of blocks. Mercury is slowing down and gaining great power here as the blocks get removed. You might think about it as like sitting in a shell, and you're pushing and pushing with strength, and then you break out of a shell. That's what's happening this week with Mercury ruling the syzygy, the new moon. And so I think there's real opportunities here to feel into fresh starts, new beginnings, and breaking out of the shell, getting into this June, this very, I think, auspicious June. Maybe the last thing to say is that Jupiter overcomes the syzygy by a sextile, very sweet sextile here, about 6 degrees, where Jupiter in Aries, Mars in Aries with Jupiter, this power conjunction of force and decision-making and decisiveness and activity, floods and feeds this new moon with the easygoing supportive sextile aspect. Very, very useful energy for this kind of fresh start, visioning and decisive kind of power play of your June month and of your June astrology. And so with the syzygy, with the new moon, there's one other fixed star that I think is relevant to bring in. The moon and the sun will join and commingle very close to the star Ion, and it's a star in a grouping of stars called the Hyades in the Taurus constellation. The Hyades are very interesting. Ion is, I guess, the left eye of the bull. Aldebaran is the right eye. Aldebaran is not in the Hyades, but the Hyades are an interesting constellation, and it fits with the theme of this period that we've been in. They were a group that wept for their brother. They were the sisters of this guy called Hyas, who was killed, and their grief, the Hyades were grieving here, was celebrated by the gods, and then they were made a constellation and put in our sky. The idea is that we can sort of weep, cry, get in touch with the realness of life. I think that crying sometimes is, in my experience when I've cried, God, it's been some of the best moments of my whole life, actually, breaking down and weeping, because I felt the most alive during those moments of collapse, So if you need to cry or let some things out, I think this would be a good moment for it here on Monday. Even the tears of joy, tears of just, God, life is so intense, and let those tears just fall down on the face. If you've lost someone, if you're grieving anything after eclipse season, or lost things, eclipses, fated beginnings and endings. That second lunar eclipse, wasn't it intense? You may have had some things removed from your life. This might be the time to let some of them out with some weeping, with some kind of free weeping. And I think the weeping can sometimes assuage, or is a good thing to run with the curiosity and the mental activation of Gemini. It's like sometimes the mind can just go haywire, and the tears can bring us back in. It's a nice complement to, I think, Gemini energy. So look for maybe some cries this week, some good cries with this conjunction to Iron that the new moon will make. Next chart, so we're now here on Friday, we have the direct station of Mercury, 10 a.m. in Central Europe. First of all, it's just to say again, Mercury is now removing blocks, that great power of the chains. I think the analogy I was trying to use is, you see in a movie sometimes people pulling the chains off of their wrists, and they'll just go, and they'll break those chains free. I think The Matrix actually is the film that I'm thinking of, where Morpheus is in that building and he's chained, and Neo is there in the helicopter, and Morpheus, goes to that inner strength of power and breaks off of those chains. This is kind of a metaphor of a direct station, that moment of great power where the blocks can be removed. That's what this chart is. It's a little bit rougher here. Saturn is squaring pretty clearly, as Saturn is stationary in the sky almost, nearing its retrograde station. And so this Saturn-Mercury square can define the week. Maybe there's more limitations as we think about what's happening, right, like this summer. Sure, it's going to be some good astrology in 2022, but we're under the kind of background and energy of some real difficult stuff happening in the world. There are still questions about disease proliferation. There are questions about the conflict in the Black Sea region. There are questions about economic instability. Those are hovering over everything that happens in June. And I don't think we get clearly out of these fears, these kind of deeper fears and deeper difficulties that are in the collective mental space and the collective physical space. That's Saturn in Aquarius overcoming here, Mercury as it stations direct. Good news is Mercury moves into Gemini 3 June, and I think that will maybe loosen up some of those fears, at least temporarily, in the month of June. So let's go talk about Algol now. Algol has this reputation, the most difficult star in the sky, the most kind of dangerous or negative energy in our tradition, in the whole of our astrological tradition. And I think that there's something to that. I mean, I've looked at many charts with Algol configurations, and you do have I've got a video on this channel, Algol, Conspiracy and Death, I think is what it's called, and I go into several chart examples. Watch that if you want to explore that darker side of Algol. That video goes into it. But I think there's another side of Algol that's being discussed more in these days with astrologers, is that it can be empowerment. It can be protection and empowerment of women, the women in our lives, who have been often abused or exploited, or even women don't get, I think, the appreciation often that they deserve in terms of the heavy lifting that they do in the society, what the society places on women, and how they're, these kind of unstated expectations. This is the story of Algol. It's the empowerment and the protection of the women around us. And so I think with Mercury stationed direct here on Algol, you might look around. Who are the women in your life? How can you ask them what they need maybe? How can I help you? Can I alleviate your burden? Can I be here for you in a way of the protector? So this is where I would go. And maybe you'll be able to sit and hold space for stories of people in your life, of their suffering, and not only women, but all suffering. I think that Algol can be an energy of that, holding space for suffering and for great challenge. So look for that this week as the blocks are removed around Mercury near this Algol energy. It takes on a more serious tonality where we might have to confront serious questions in society, and Lord knows that's going on right now. Just turn on the news. There's all kinds of questions around violence and weapons of violence and how we are going to confront those in the society or manage those. I think that's part of this direct station as well. Those themes can come into play. And now finally, this final chart, Saturday, 2347 in Central Europe, in the Western Balkans where I am, and in Germany and much of this part of the world. We are on Central European daylight time right now. So in the evening on Saturday, Saturn, having stationed, will now start moving backwards. It's the retrograde station of Saturn. The direct station happened last October. So there may be a story that you can draw from October now to May. And as Saturn was plowing forward in Aquarius and getting into some novelty in terms of its position this turn in these later degrees of Aquarius, now it stops and stations. This station of Saturn happens in a place in the zodiac where Saturn is extremely powerful. I tweeted about this maybe last week. The Saturn in Aquarius story, March 2020, it defined the changes in the world. Some very, very literal astrology, Saturn in Aquarius. And that's what I find with Saturn. It's a 30-year cycle. It's the longest traditional planet in terms of its cycle. And it really does mirror and match larger turns in the collective reality, like the turn towards Zoom and technology and restriction that we all experienced starting in 2020 and that we grappled with in 2021 and we're still grappling with in 2022. Not all of those rules have been removed. We're not back to normal. We probably won't be back to a pure normal. We're going to be navigating this age of the kind of bio necessity, you might say. And how do we manage this? Well, I would look for themes around mundane astrological events. Maybe there will be announcements this week around some of the new novel diseases that are emergent. Maybe there's more that's going to develop around this story of look what's happening in Asia. Some of the most restrictive moments of the whole of this turn of Saturn and Aquarius are extant right now. And so look for upgrades or updates around that narrative. So the other thing about the chart itself is that Mercury is now moving direct, squaring Saturn as it goes retrograde. There's a sense of handing off of the baton. You know, Saturn moved all the way to 25 degrees of Aquarius, the 26th degree. Now it has to return and go back. While Mercury now is going to run forward. You think about a relay race, you're handing a baton to someone to continue the journey forward. Saturn gives off to Mercury here. And I think it again underscores for me how important Mercury's trot through Gemini will be to move us along, move our collective story along, move your story along this year. Some great astrology in 2022. Enjoy this month of 2022. I know I've said it a few times on this channel, but enjoy it. Some great June 2022 moments here. Go out and do some things, explore some things. Use this lunation cycle, particularly the waxing phase, to get out and expand, maybe start some new things. That Virgo moon is a potent one. I'll probably look at that next week in detail. And then the final thing I want to say is Saturn will be conjoined the star Sador as it stations retrograde. Anytime a planet is stopping in the sky, the degree of the ecliptic that the planet is projected onto, it gets this great focus, and other things that are projected onto that degree of the ecliptic, like a fixed star, become activated. And so Sador is a star in the Cygnus constellation, the Swan, represents Zeus, Jupiter, according to tradition. I like that Robson gives this a contemplative, dreamy, cultured, adaptable nature. And I think that we can think about flying maybe above it all, the spirit of kind of a swan-like kind of a bird's eye view as you're looking maybe at your life this year in sort of a dreamy, flighty way. Maybe some of you, I know friends out there that they're going to be traveling. I'm going to be doing some traveling in June. So we're now maybe able to kind of fly a little bit, fly like the eagle. What's that song? The Steve Miller Band. I'm going to fly like the eagle. Something like this may be emergent for you here. Jupiter turned into the Swan, impregnated Leda, and they say Helen of Troy was part of that offspring. So maybe there's some real beauty that you can get to producing in June. Venus, after all, is in Taurus. The kind of celebratory, beautiful side of life is coming here. And I think that this enjoyment, generative enjoyment, and, nurturance and sort of dreamy pleasures. So enjoy that as Saturn is stationing retrograde here to punctuate Cygnus. And then maybe we're going to have to also look back. Saturn will station direct in October. And so, maybe this kind of dreamy enjoyment we get now to the direct station of Saturn in October during that next eclipse season. I think there's something here that's telling us, enjoy Saturn being backward a little bit in between eclipses. And maybe there's a sense of pause with some of the accelerated changes in the reality that Saturn Aquarius has brought. So that's weekly astrology. Have a wonderful week ahead. Thanks for being here. I'll talk to you really soon.